Emmanuel, feel free to start whenever you're ready.
Okay, I think we can start now. Let's start now, so we won't be out of time. So for the interest of time, I want us to I want to welcome the speakers and every other participants that are currently with us. So we are expecting more, although and we want to use this opportunity to introduce the speakers. So for those who are with us now, welcome to this webinar session. So, the theme for this webinar session is taking action for climate change and biodiversity. Taking action for climate change and biodiversity. Okay, so as we can see, I don't know if the flyer is showing on your screen. And if it's showing, we have taking action for climate change and biodiversity. So what's the purpose or the aim of these webinars is to actually come together for us to learn about our beautiful planet and renew our commitment to protecting and preserving it for future generations. So we have Ambassador Emmanuel, who is the Youth and Peace Advocate and President of African Youth Network Nigeria. So he's a speaker in this webinar. And we have Cynthia Zhang, if I pronounce correctly. If I don't, please pardon. A Chinese American environmentalist, and also the president, Monarchs Matter. So she is a speaker of this webinar, and she resides in the United States. So while Mr. Ferdinand, that's ambassador, resides in Nigeria. And for your information, Cynthia is okay. Cynthia Zhang is a 16-year-old youth environmentalist located in New York, United States. She is the founder and president of Monarchs Matter, a non-profit organization to protect vulnerable monarchs, butterflies, and empower youth. She is also a co-chair of the Rewild Long Island Social Media Committee. She also helps grow biodiversity in our community using the power of creative arts and media. So Miss Cynthia here, she is the president of Monarchs Matter and also a co-chairperson of Rewild Long Island. So you can get more information about her on monarchsmatter.net and rewildlongisland.org. So that's for Miss Cynthia, and she is actually our first speaker for this webinar. So, okay, Miss Cynthia, please, can you
Yeah, of course, I could start. I will share my presentation. Okay, thank you, Accolade Daniel, for introducing me. I'm so excited to be here with you guys. This is my second time hosting an international webinar with individuals who are also environmentally driven from like meeting you guys, and it's really cool to see you guys that you are from other countries. So really excited to be with you all today. Um, so my presentation will be about biodiversity. First, we will start with the basics of biodiversity, then its importance and threats to biodiversity, and how we can take action to help promote biodiversity in our communities. Okay, so starting off, what is biodiversity? Biodiversity is short for biological diversity, or the variety of life on Earth, including animals, plants, insects, and organisms, and microorganisms. All of these species live and work together to support a balance of life and maintain healthy ecosystems. So from this, you could think about the food web. Here I have a food web on the right of the screen, and you can see how animals depend on each other, plants and animals depend on each other to survive and to maintain a balance. So the biodiversity is like connecting multiple food webs together in the ecosystem, and all of these animals support each other and make sure that the ecosystem is healthy and thriving. So, for example, if you were to remove one of these animals, for instance, the rabbit, then the fox would have like less rabbits to eat as a food source, so then the fox will rely on the bird. But when that happens, the bird populations also decreases, and then it disrupts the balance of the food web. Like the fox now have enough food sources since it only relies on the rabbit and the bird. And when the bird declines, wheat the amount of wheat increases. So the amount of grasshoppers increase and then the amount of owls increase. But then that also decreases the amount of mice and wheat and etc. So it disrupts the balance of the ecosystem if we don't have biodiversity. So now to get a better idea of the benefits of biodiversity, here you could see there are two different ecosystems. So imagine you're a butterfly. So which seems more appealing to you? The green grass lawn or the wildflower yard? Well, it would definitely be the wildflowers because on the green lawn, there's nothing to eat, there's no flowers or nectar, there are no native plants for the butterfly caterpillars to feed on. So for biodiversity, the wildflower yard would be a better choice for the butterfly. And I don't want to make this idea seem limited because obviously wildflower lawns don't only support butterflies, but also other pollinators like bees and birds and beetles and all kinds of insects. And these native plants and wildflowers also support soil health and microorganisms in the soil. So it's important to understand that biodiversity isn't just for one organism, but for all organisms. And also, I want to give another example of biodiversity. So before I mentioned that birds are also pollinators that rely on, birds also rely on biodiverse habitat. So for example, a nest of baby birds need to be fed 500 caterpillars a day. That's a lot of caterpillars. And that's only for a day, so summing it all up, that would be 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars to raise a family of baby birds. So if you were to have a grass lawn, that wouldn't support a family of baby birds. Like because there would be no native plants for the caterpillars to eat. So there are no caterpillars on this lawn. But then for the wildflower yard in the right, there is probably an abundance of caterpillars. And that way the baby birds will have enough to eat. So this also shows the difference between a monoculture and a polyculture. Monoculture is when you only grow one species of plant. So on the left, you see a monoculture of grass, while on the right, you see a polyculture, which is an area where a lot of species are grown. And like I said before, this creates a more biodiverse environment for our wildlife to thrive. Unfortunately, the grass lawn is a culture that a lot of people in the United States, I see here there are a lot of grass lawns. You see grass lawns more often than you see wildflower yards here in the US, which is unfortunate. But we can work together bit by bit, raising awareness to make sure that these wildflower yards are what people want to grow and what people see as more aesthetically pleasing, hopefully, than a grass lawn. Okay, so the importance of biodiversity. So it helps wildlife and animals thrive, but why is biodiversity important to us? Why should we care if the environment is biodiverse for animals and insects and microorganisms in the soil? Well, biodiversity helps us maintain food security. Biodiversity also includes genetic diversity. So for agriculture, we need to have a diverse genetics in our plants, like tomatoes. We want tomatoes to have diverse genetic composition because if, for example, if you only have one species, like if you only have one tomato with one type of gene, and that gene is, let's say, if the tomato plant has a gene that's more vulnerable to drought, then that tomato is just wiped out and there are no other tomatoes with other genes that might be more resistant to drought. And then also food security from soil health. If you didn't know, about 60% of all life on Earth lives in the soil. So I don't know about you, but that's really crazy. 60% of all life on Earth is in the soil. So imagine how many organisms are in the soil and how important it is to maintain that so we can also maintain food security. And lastly, we have pollination. 1/3 of our global food production relies on insect pollination. So imagine 1 out of every 3 bites of your food, of your meals that you eat every day, comes from pollinators. So it's important for us to maintain biodiversity. So we have pollinators to pollinate our food. Second is climate change, biodiversity. When we have biodiversity and rich ecosystems, they absorb greenhouse gases, which includes forests, mangroves, to the phytoplankton in the sea. For phytoplankton, they absorb 30 to 40% of the world's carbon emissions. So that helps mitigate climate change a lot. And also, rich ecosystems help protect against extreme weather caused by climate change, such as flooding and sea level rise. And third, biodiversity is important for disease prevention. So, a high variety of species in an area kind of creates a buffer between us, humans, and disease. And it also, more organisms mean that it's harder for the disease, like whether that's a bacteria or virus, to find a specific host. So it kind of dilutes the spread of disease among organisms if it's harder for the disease to find hosts. 3 more factors that biodiversity contributes to is clean air and water. Roots, leaves, and algae from forests, the ocean, etc. help filter out pollutants. And global economy, more than half of the world's gross domestic product, or GDP relies on nature, which is $44 trillion. And so that $44 trillion can be at risk if biodiversity loss continues. And finally, mental health. Many studies have shown that environments with more species richness and natural features like trees, birds, plants, and waterways can boost our mood and self-esteem and decrease cortisol levels. Cortisol is our stress hormone. So these are the 6 factors that biodiversity contributes to. However, biodiversity loss is happening. It has been an ongoing issue, and since 1970, there has been a 73% decline in the wildlife population, according to the WWF, or World Wildlife Fund, 2024 Living Planet Report. So 73% decline. Think about how many species are being impacted by that decline. And I'd like to highlight especially monarch butterflies that have been impacted by the loss of biodiversity. Monarch butterflies have declined by 95% since 1996, according to Monarch Watch's tagging data and research. And also, extinction rates have increased by 100,000%, which is the same as 1,000 to 10,000 times higher than the natural baseline extinction rate. So the natural extinction rate without human intervention should be 1 to 5 species per year. But now, today, our extinction rate is 150 species per day. So think about how many more species that is. One is per year, and then the other one is per day, which is really, really serious. And this is also the same as we're losing 10% of species per decade, so 10% of species are going extinct per decade. So what are the causes of biodiversity loss? They're all due to human activities. So first is climate change, which is caused by greenhouse gas emissions. We have climate change causes extreme weather and altered habitat. For example, monarch butterflies hibernate in Mexico and rely on the microclimate of oilmo fir forests to stay away from the cold and rain. But due to climate change, more extreme weather is happening, and including severe snowstorms, which the monarch butterflies can't tolerate. So that causes mass mortality events of monarch butterflies. And it's not only to monarchs, but also other species, including climate change causes ocean acidification, where corals and crustaceans are at risk. So climate change affects biodiversity all around the world. And then we have habitat loss caused by deforestation, urbanization, and herbicide use. On the left, you could see an image of the oilmo fir forests in Mexico that monarch butterflies hibernate in. Over here, you could see there's like an orange patch, and the trees appear orange because this is a whole colony of monarch butterflies. This is an aerial image of a colony of monarch butterflies, and you can see how many there are just concentrated in this one area. But then above it, you could see how the oilmo fir forests are being deforested, whether that's for agriculture or mining. So habitat loss is a very huge contributor to biodiversity loss. Then we have overexploitation, which is when animals and fish are excessively hunted and extracted from the environment. So if we extract so many species and resources from our Earth, then we'll have less suitable habitat, and it also depletes the number of species. And 2 more causes of biodiversity loss is pollution. Pollutants harm wildlife and damage habitat. On the left, you could see a massive amount of plastic right next to a forest, and there's no way a bird or any animal could live on the plastic. And then invasive species, because invasive species compete with native species. The difference between invasive species and native species is that native species originate from the land. So let's say you go like a few hundred years ago, what species would you see in Nigeria, for example? Those would be the native species. The species that were kind of always there and developed there. And invasive species are species that came from other parts of the world into your area. And they could be harmful because not only could they compete with native species, but they could also bring disease. On the bottom, you see an image of a zebra mussel, which is native to Eurasia, but they arrived to the Great Lakes in the United States from European ships. And since zebra mussels are invasive species, they don't have any natural predators. That means they reproduce and grow out of control, and that harms the marine environment because they filter out excessive amounts of algae, which other sea life depend on as a food source. And they also attach to native mussels. As you see here, there's a large cluster of zebra mussels attached to a native mussel, which sort of suffocates the native mussels and prevents them from moving and growing properly. So as a result, the native mussel population goes down, which can have drastic effects on the environment, as we saw earlier with the food web example. So how can you take action to grow biodiversity in your community and fight biodiversity loss? So first is to grow native plants without pesticides, of course, because pesticides can harm insect populations like monarch butterflies or bumblebees or honeybees. And I want to emphasize on native plants because, as I said before, native plants originate from the land that they're in, so that means they have more benefits to biodiversity since they have already established that connection with other native species in the area. Next, we have eliminating pesticide and herbicide use. Pretty self-explanatory. Pesticides and herbicides are usually directed towards killing plants and insects and pests that we don't want, but it often kills the plants, the native plants and native insects and animals that we do want to conserve. Third, reduce your carbon footprint, whether that's growing your own food, because when you grow your own food, you don't need to drive to a supermarket or it also takes into account decreasing the carbon footprint from transporting the food from a farm to your supermarket. So by growing your own food, you reduce the amount of carbon that you use in your life. And also driving less, walking more, using public transportation more, or biking can be really helpful to reduce your carbon footprint. Fourth is to buy sustainable products. Here you see the FSC and the Rainforest Alliance. These are two certifications that you could see on products, like they're little symbols that you could either see on, like if you buy a wooden table, you might see the FSC certification, which means that the wood used to build the table was sustainably sourced, and the companies chopping down the trees are taking into account conserving biodiversity. Same with the Rainforest Alliance. They take into account biodiversity when they extract resources from our environment. Composting kitchen scraps. When you throw out like a banana peel or the core of an apple, or if you throw out like the tops of carrots, they go into the landfill and produce methane, which is a greenhouse gas that causes, well, it doesn't cause, but it contributes a lot to climate change and global warming. So by composting our kitchen scraps or putting them back into the soil, We transform food waste into soil food for the soil, which means that the nutrients from our food scraps help more plants grow. And we also have volunteering for biodiversity efforts, whether that's beach cleanups, planting events like planting trees or native plants, or getting involved in nonprofits. I'm going to talk a bit more about Monarchs Matter later, which is the nonprofit that I founded this year, and how you could get involved. And last but not least, inform yourself and educate others. It's always important to stay on top of current news and environmental issues to know how you could help. And that also includes, we have the power of social media nowadays, and we could take advantage of social media by following environmental accounts to stay updated on current environmental issues. Okay, so a bit about Monarchs Matter, how you could get involved and who is Monarchs Matter. So Monarchs Matter is a nonprofit that I started this year with the mission of protecting monarch butterflies by restoring their habitat and collecting community science data, citizen science data for um, community science projects to use that data to conduct research for conservation planning. And also, we do a lot of awareness events, including like community workshops where we distribute milkweed, which is the sole food source of monarch butterflies. Over here on the container, you could see some milkweed leaves, and some caterpillars are eating the milkweed leaves. And milkweed is only host plant of monarch butterflies, meaning that monarch caterpillars only eat milkweed, and monarch butterflies only lay eggs on milkweed. So we try to plant as much milkweed as possible to help support monarch butterflies in our community. So far, we've planted 150 milkweed plants. And if monarch butterflies aren't native to your area, you could do the same thing by supporting butterfly species native to your country or your community. Since I know we're all located in different countries, so it's important to research about the pollinators that are native to your area and what plants you could grow in your area to support those pollinators. And for Monarchs Matter, we also run the Raise, Tag, and Release, or RTR summer program. You could see two images on the right are from the RTR summer program, and also installing a monarch way station where we certify monarch habitats to raise awareness of what we are doing and how we're growing milkweed and nectar plants to help monarch butterflies. And we also raise and tag butterflies with youth to help them develop a greater sense of connection and responsibility for the environment. And it also allows them to see how delicate and complex nature is and how important it is for us to understand and protect it. And that is all from me. If you have any questions, Accolade Daniel, you could message Accolade Daniel in the chat and he could read out the questions and I could answer them. And then if you want to get involved, you could visit monarchsmatter.net to learn more about Monarchs Matter, and then rewildlongisland.org to learn more about Rewild Long Island, which is the other nonprofit I'm part of, which is also based in New York in the United States, and their mission is similar to Monarchs Matter, growing biodiversity and building climate resilience by growing native plants and promoting sustainable landscaping. And that is all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Cynthia. It's a wonderful submission, and I really enjoy your presentation as it is very interactive, and the images were relating. And even if you have no idea about what Monarchs Matter or Monarchs Butterfly is about, And with this presentation of yours, one could actually easily, even to a layman, follow through and have or grasp a quantifiable knowledge about what monarchs butterfly are. Okay. Thank you very much, Cynthia. And for the interest of time, I would have loved to open the floor for questions, but and I think it would save us so much time to put the question session when both speakers are done with their presentation. So personally, there's a question for you, Cynthia, but I would like to have Ambassador Emmanuel Ferdinand to take on the stage. Ambassador Emmanuel Ferdinand, if you could hear me, um, please you can go ahead and make your presentation.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Cynthia, for the wonderful presentation. And it was a nice one. Good to know about what you intend to do to conserve some species, especially the butterflies. So this brings us to what we have this moment, which is taking action for climate change and biodiversity. And I will emphasize on climate change, taking action for climate change. All right, so Akule, please, could you share my screen? Just a minute while he shares the screen. We're talking about climate change. From climate, what we understand by climate, a temporary or a short-term weather condition of a particular place at the moment, which shows either it is hot or it is cold, or depending on the degree of the weather climate at the moment. So if the climate is not in order, or if there's any emission, it is going to affect the climate. It is going to affect the weather, and that is what brings out what is climate change. Just a minute. Okay. The next slide, please. All right, now go to the other slide. What is climate? For us to quickly understand the presentation. Please, the next slide. All right. Okay. All right, perfect. Thank you so much. Now, what is climate? Climate is just like I've already said, is overall average weather at a place over a period of time. Now, the difference between climate and weather is that weather refers to a short-term state of the atmosphere, and climate refers to a long-term pattern of weather. So there are approximately 5 main climate types: the tropical, the dry, the temperature, continental, and polar. Next slide, please. Because of our time, I will explain better. Next slide. But I just want you to understand that the climate is simply a short-term climate change. Now, when the climate had stayed stagnant or had stayed for a long period of time without changing, it has become a climate change. which refers to a long-term warning of the planet due to an increase in average global temperatures, primarily caused by human activities that release greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So when there are a lot of activities ongoing, some human activities, some of them could be caused by nature, some of them could be caused by human beings. So when these activities have been emitted into the atmosphere to cause a change in what used to be, a change in what has been the pattern of the weather or the climate, it is now referred to climate change. So when we have a particular weather or a particular climate, and it's as if it has stayed for a longer period of time, thereby affecting the biodiversity, affecting the ecosystem, becomes a problem. And that is why it is called global warming. It is called climate change. All right, the next slide. Okay, now let us look at the causes of this climate change and its effects. The first one is rapid industrialization. When we have so many industries emitting smoke, emitting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, it causes harm. So when we have constant emission of smoke, constant emission of that carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, you have a cluster of these industries, causes a climate change. Now, energy use, agricultural practices, where we overgraze, where we use so many industrialized machines that can emit carbon dioxide into the air, into the atmosphere, into the ecosystem. Deforestation, indiscriminate cutting down of trees, all these are causes of climate change, because when the trees that are supposed to absorb carbon dioxide that is emitted and then emit oxygen are not there, they tend to affect the ecosystem. So the effects of this climate change is rising temperatures, rising sea levels, unpredictable weather patterns. We have land degradation, loss of wildlife and biodiversity. All this will now, the ecosystem will no longer be friendly. The environment will be hazardous, have a lot of activities ongoing. We have drought, we have precipitation, and we equally have a volcanic eruption. All these tend to be the effect. The next slide. Please, the next slide. Hello, can you hear me?
Okay, I can. Okay, I think there is a glitch from my side, but I think I'm back online now. Let me continue.
Shares my slide again. So I was talking about the effect, the causes, and what climate change has really caused the ecosystem. So, like I said earlier, when all these activities or all these actions are ongoing, they tend to affect the climate. All right. When there is no proper waste management, also, sorry, the next slide, they tend to, all these activities, rapid transportation, emission of fossils, emission of gas and coal, when all these things are going around globally, they equally affect the climate. Now, the research has shown that the total U.S. greenhouse gas emission by economic sector as 2020, 11% of agriculture. Now, what it means is that 11% of activities in agriculture had caused so much climate change. Now, commercial and residential areas has caused 13% of climate change. Industry has 24%. Electricity has 25%, transportation has 27%. Now, this transportation has to do with emission of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and transportation, when we use the land means of transportation, when we use other means of transportation that use fossil, that's fuel, equally use coal and use other fossil substances, they tend to affect the climate. So transportation has really had the highest number of greenhouse gas emission as of 2020. Next slide. Please, the next slide. All right, now look at the activities that have been ongoing. These are the activities. No, please, the other slide. Let me explain the activities that had really caused so much climate change globally. Please go back to the, all right, thank you. Now, when you look at these whole activities, you'll be able to understand the level of activities that had been ongoing, which has really affected the ecosystem. Now, you will see the aircraft emission. The aircraft emission, you will see open burning savannas. You will see residential cooking and heating. You see brick lanes. You will see on-road cars and trucks. All these are actually causing climate change. So when all these activities are ongoing, and when all these activities are going on in the environment, they really and drastically affect the ecosystem. So you equally see on the right hand of the image, you will see ship emissions. So all these activities, when they go on and then emit carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, it becomes toxic. The environment becomes toxic. And this has become a global challenge because every country has a replica of this image, have where people produce, they use cars for transportation as a means of transportation, they use ship, they use other means of transportation, and it becomes a general activity. So it has become a global problem. The UN had also been trying to mitigate this effect. So when all these activities are ongoing year to year in all the countries, you know, they tend to affect the climate, the ozone layer depletion, a whole lot of climate actions or climate change. Just like in China, China has 30% gas emission, 30% gas emission. It is the highest climate polluter. It has really sent or emits a lot of or caused a whole lot of climate changes. So China has 30%, while in Chad has the highest, or is one of the countries that also cause climate change. But we also have some countries like Comoros that have zero net climate emission, and other countries as well. All right, next slide, please. Hello, are you there? Please, the next slide. All right, like I said earlier, these are burning fossil fuels, coal, oil, gas, deforestation, transportation. These are some of the major or the main factors that have caused the climate changes. The next slide. All right, this is a example of what has been happening generally in all countries. And that is why it is now a global challenge. It can equally refer to as global warming. So the atmosphere or the climate has been, so these are the activities, the activities are going on. You will be able to see carbon dioxide being emitted into the environment, and this happens virtually in all countries. So the ecosystem has become toxic. The next slide. This is transportation. The next slide. This is deforestation. Now, if you look at the diagram very well, you will see the. All right. Now, let me bring in the connection between climate change and biodiversity. So how does climate change affect biodiversity? So when all those activities are ongoing, they tend to affect the web of life, which Cynthia had earlier explained, all the habitats ranging from the plants, the animals, the oceans, and all of them that inhabit. So when there is climate change, it affects biodiversity, which could lead to extinction of some species. Some species will go into extinction. We'll have biodiversity loss. We'll have problems in the health sector. We'll have probably, because all these emissions affect the air, it will pollute the air and then become so toxic for human to live in. So if there is no climate actions taken, it will definitely affect the environment. It will become so toxic for people to live. So research has shown that in the next 2030, there's going to be a whole lot of damages, a lot of deaths, about more than 50 million or billion persons will be affected by 2030. So that is why it is very paramount, it's very crucial that we take climate action very seriously. And whatever investment we make in climate action, whatever thing or any finance we put into climate action is an investment. It is not for charity's sake. The next slide. Okay, climate crisis. Go ahead, the next slide. The next slide. All right, now this research has shown that 3.6 billion people already in areas highly prone to climate change. Between 2030 and 2050, climate change is expected to cause approximately 250,000 additional deaths per year. So what it means is that if we don't take decisive measures to combat climate actions, there's going to be a whole lot of problem from 2030 to 2050. So it is very important we take climate actions, just like the UN nation has been doing, United Nations have been doing, sending some help, some creating awareness, just like the COP of 29 that we just had. It was just basically talking about climate change. So it is a global issue currently. So that is the reason why we need to take action for us to combat climate change. The next slide. Please, the next slide. All right, these are just the examples of what climate change had caused. This is drought. Currently in Zambia, they are experiencing so much drought. So in Zambia, currently they are experiencing drought. So it has also affected food security. It has affected life. It has affected animals. It has made some animals to go into extinction. So it's very important that we take actions to avert some of these further challenges, further problems. So climate change is causing a shift in the habitat range of some species and a change in the timing of biological events. This alters ecosystem structure and exacerbates the impacts of invasive species and land use changes. So I think Cynthia had also mentioned this while she was making her presentation, that this climate change in biodiversity, that all these things that when they are not taken good care of, they tend to make some animals, some species to go into extinction. So a changing climate requires rapid knowledge, adaptation, and is expected to affect Matranga and associated practices such as this Chinese language. The next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, so the coastal settings are experiencing increasing sea surface temperature, sea level rise, ocean acidification, erosion, and flooding vulnerability. So basically, climate change had really caused a whole lot of problems. In Nigeria, some months ago, we had flooding in parts of the northern country. It is also as a result of climate change. So it has also threatened well-being. It has threatened life. It has threatened the health of people, the occupants, and of those people, thereby making them, live. It has made them to leave their environment and caused them to be displaced, and it has also increased the number of displaced persons in the country. So you would see the effects of climate change. The next slide. Next slide, please. So what are the possible actions for climate change? So this is a very big question for us to ask. What are the possible actions that we could take? Now, according to Antonio Guterres, and I quote him, he said, climate finance is not charity, it is an investment. Climate action is not optional, it is collective and imperative. It thereby implies that whatever thing we are doing, whatever fund we are giving out, whatever activity, whatever thing we are doing in order to avert this climate change is not charity, it's not optional, it is something we should do, it's a collective responsibility. So we don't fund for climate actions as a charity work. It is done because of the importance, it is done because of, it is just what is obtainable, what we should do for our own safety, for us to preserve our life, preserve the planet, because we do not have planet B. There is no other planet we have. It is just this planet that we have, which is Earth. So whatever thing we invest in order to combat climate actions, it is an investment which pays the highest interest. The next slide. Please go on to the next slide. So other possible actions we could take is transition to renewable energy sources. So we tend to begin to use some of these other means of getting electricity, some of these other to generate power, instead of us to burn, instead of us to use fossil, instead of us to use coal, instead of us to use gas for generation of electricity. We could use renewable energy. We could use solar panel. We could use other means to generate power. Now we talk about this idea of using solar energy for us to power our cars, which is ongoing, that will not use any fuel. I know in Nigeria here, particularly from my state, there is this car that is called Rotes, which is being powered with solar energy. So we should begin to look out for innovations, use these innovative means of getting some of these things done without polluting the environment. So we have waste reduction and recycling. We should take this very seriously, because when we dump refuse everywhere, and when they decompose, they send out disease and cause environmental hazard. So we should take this, we create the awareness, inform people to recycle their waste, create awareness for waste reduction, and then plant trees as well, because it will help to give enable us getting carbon dioxide, getting oxygen, while the trees absorb carbon dioxide. So we should take up individual actions, take up collective actions. I know about a man from Caribbean island currently that wants to travel to 195 countries in 1 year from next year. His name is John Hostialik from Grenada, a Caribbean man. So by next year, he will be visiting all the countries. And what he intends to achieve is to create climate action awareness. So he wants to travel around with zero gas emission. He wants to use these these cars that won't emit gas, that won't cause harm. Then he visits other countries to inform them, create the awareness for us to have a better world. So we also have other organizations that are also talking about climate actions, educate people about climate actions, tell them what they tend to get if they take up climate actions very seriously. So, and call to action. I want to use this opportunity to inform us to take climate action very seriously, because if we don't take these things seriously, they will affect us, and some of these animals, some of these species will go into extinction. So individuals, the government, some non-profit organizations should team up, encouraging a partnership for us to have a better world, a better place we can live. So thank you so much for your time. So if there's any question, let's take up some of the questions we have, and then move from there. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Ferdinand. I think actually Daniel had some internet issues, but we could still answer any of your questions. Feel free to unmute if you have any questions, or put your question in the chat, either to direct message us or in the meeting group chat. Yes, the certificate attendance link was just sent by Ferdinand. The Google form link is in the chat if you want to get your certificate, but it's not mandatory. Just if you're interested in the certificate, feel free to fill out the form. Okay, so I see one question. How can biodiversity help adapt to climate change? From Bashir. So biodiversity, I am assuming your question means that how biodiversity could help climate change, and climate change can be ameliorated by biodiversity in many ways. First, biodiversity. If we have a biodiverse environment of native plants sequester more carbon from the atmosphere into the soil compared to non-native plants. They sequester carbon, meaning they absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere into their roots, their leaves, their stems, and every year they grow back larger and healthier, and which helps them sequester more and more carbon into the soil. And climate change can also impact biodiversity the other way, because climate change, due to causing extreme weather and also the temperature rises, it alters habitat that species need to survive in. So, like for example, throughout the seasons, you feel like it turns hot and then cold and hot and then cold. But for many organisms, they could only tolerate a smaller temperature range. So when the global temperatures warm due to climate change, species become more vulnerable, and that's also why extinction rates are increasing. And Fernanda, do you have anything else to add to that question of how biodiversity could help adapt to climate change?
Yes, that's a very important question. Now, I want you to take it this way. Biodiversity, we are the biodiversity, human beings are part of them. Then climate change, we are also part. So if you look at biodiversity and climate change, they are connected, they are interwoven. So if we don't have biodiversity, there won't be climate change. In other words, it is the activities of human beings that cause that of climate change. So for human beings to adapt to climate change, it means they should stop, polluting the environment. Okay, so they should take actions by doing the right things, avoid deforestation, avoid constant emission of gas into the atmosphere. So in doing that, other less species will be able to adapt because the environment had become conducive. The environment had become less toxic for human beings to live. So in this, we will also adapt, we will also adapt to climate change. I hope that's clear. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I agree. That was really clear. Yeah, Precious, question.
Okay, Cynthia, and Ambassador Ferdinand, thank you very much for your presentation. So, but I actually want us to discuss this biodiversity from this perspective. So, I would actually like to be more enlightened as regards the idea that civilization could not have even gotten to this level which we are today. So if we look at how civilization have started from the Greek civilization to so many other civilizations until the Paris civilization, global civilization we are now. So without all these activities, which actually leads to climate change and the rest of them. So, do you think we could or we can actually have this level of, should I call it development or should I call it level of advancement as regards technology? So, could we have gotten to this level without all these activities which actually caused this biodiversity and which sorry actually caused this climate change. So and if what other alternative we could have done or what other alternative we could have taken to in fact get um, all our resources or any other thing, what other alternative we could have taken to actually get to this level without altering the order of nature. Thank you. I don't know if you get my point.
All right. If I heard you correctly, you want to know how we would be able to advance, like in terms of development, without using the conventional ways of doing things like transportation, like rapid industrialization, using fossils for uh, transportation. Just normally all the things we've been doing, if there's any way we could get developed without using all these conventional means, right?
Yes, of course, of
Did I
course.
hear you? Yeah, okay, fine. First of all, for us to get to this point, that is the essence of innovation. Before there was nothing like solar energy. There was nothing like those primitive years we were using charcoal. We were using wood for for us to get fire, for us to make fire, for us to do so many things. We were using there was high level of gas emission into the atmosphere. But currently we are beginning to renew. That is the essence of renewable energy that is ongoing. So we need to create much awareness. We need to create much awareness for us to adapt to these um, emerging technologies. Use these emerging technologies like the vehicle I talked about. There was nothing of such before, but because of innovation, we have seen the effect of continuous usage of gas of petrol or other generally fuel for us to power our cars, generate power and other things that we are doing. So innovation had made us to know that, and then awareness has also made us to know that when we continue using all these conventional means of doing so many things, we are endangering our environment, we are endangering the ecosystem and causing biodiversity loss. So what I'm saying in essence is that innovation, first of all, is what we can leverage on, all right? And then awareness, by telling people that constant usage of these things will definitely affect in other words, when they must have gained this knowledge, what comes to their mind is, okay, since I've known that this thing is going to cause this, what are the best ways or alternate ways to avert this? All right. So all these things, all these innovations that we've seen is as a result of the awareness that we created, that when we continue towing in this, moving on this pedestal, that is going to cause harm. All right. It's going to cause harm to the environment. So we now begin to innovate, invest so many things that had actually helped us currently. I don't know if you're getting what I'm saying. All right, let me recap. First of all, your question is how to go about getting the things we are doing done without using the conventional means in order not to affect the environment, in order to avoid climate change. So when I said the first thing for us to do is to create the awareness. Now, if the awareness is created, we now begin to use technologies to stop using the current current technology, the current method of doing those things. Just like now, the car had been manufactured. It's left for us to purchase the car. It is also part of the ways we would stop gas emission. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely, because I definitely agree with Ferdinand how he's saying that we can't stay with our traditional ways, like driving cars, although sometimes it is necessary, but we also need to consider alternatives like walking or biking, which could help mitigate climate change and greenhouse gas emissions. And I think that also ties in with before in my presentation, I mentioned how green grass lawns are a culture or tradition that Americans tend to have when they buy a house, buy a home. They just grow a grass lawn, which isn't necessarily good for the environment, and we need to change people's mindsets in order to create change. So yeah, this is what this webinar is for. So thank you for showing up. We are past time, so I guess we could take one more question if you guys have any. I think in the chat, Cheyenne asks, what are some actionable steps that young people from different parts of the world can take to combat climate change and protect biodiversity? And how can we ensure these efforts lead to measurable impacts in both local and global contexts? So, measurable impacts in global contexts might be a bit hard to quantify, but for local contexts, there are definitely steps that young people can take to combat climate change and biodiversity, such as, like Anne Ferdinand mentioned, driving cars less. And in my presentation, I also mentioned growing native plants. If you have a garden, if you live in an apartment, if you have a balcony or a roof that you could grow plants on, definitely that can be an option. If you can, when you're done eating a banana and you could throw your banana peel into the soil so it could return the nutrients into the soil for you to grow more food. That could be an option, like composting kitchen scraps. Or like I mentioned before, you could search up volunteer activities near you or environmental nonprofits near you where you could volunteer at and help out maybe with whether they're doing the beach cleanup or they're planting native plants and trees. And with that, I think, Anne Ferdinand, would you like to talk a little bit about your tree and native planting project that you're starting in December?
Yes, thank you so much. It just resonates with the questions the two persons have already asked. How can we remove carbon dioxide? Which is almost the same thing with what are some actionable steps that young people from different parts of the world can take to combat climate change and protect our biodiversity. Now, currently, we want to organize tree planting projects. These are some of the actionable steps young people can take. Now, let me take up this by saying, if you plant 100 trees within your environment, another person plants flowers, plants some other shrubs around, by the time you add them up, we have planted close to 200 or 300 plants. And each of these trees or each of these flowers have their own contribution. They tend to absorb the carbon dioxide and then emit oxygen. So you will see that by the time we do this generally in so many countries or from the grassroots, we are starting from there to effect changes. We are combating the so currently we want to organize projects in Africa Youth Network where we want to 500 trees in 5 African countries from next year. Is a project that will take us close to 3 years to execute. We have some countries that we intend to do that. We have Nigeria, we have Uganda, we have Kenya, we have South Africa, we have Kenya, about 5 countries, 5 African countries where we can some of the actions we can take. By the time we do this, it helps to remove carbon dioxide from our environment and then emits oxygen. All right. So I call on everybody to join us while we take up this action. And Cynthia had also said we need to preserve some of these um, and preserve some of these species. All right. Sorry.
I think Ferdinand, he might have some internet issues. He'll be back soon. If you have any questions, feel free to pop in the chat or after this webinar, if you want to contact us, you could email us at, I could put my email in. My email is monarchsmatter.net@gmail.com. And Ferdinand, I believe, I'm not sure what his email is, but you can definitely contact them on Instagram, which is African Youth Network. I could put that link in the chat.
All right. Sorry, I'm back.
No problem. Did you want to finish what you were talking about before, or was that pretty much it?
Yes, I was saying that we are taking out actions. Okay. Everybody, in fact, climate change is a collective responsibility, and it's quite imperative that every youth join, because we are no longer the leaders of tomorrow. We are the leaders of today, and we should take up responsibilities in order to help combat climate actions. Okay. Project is going to commence. Okay. So I call on other youths to join us while we carry out these actions. Okay. Thank you so much. You can reach out to us on WhatsApp, on LinkedIn for further information. Because of our time, I am unable to continue, so we could have other things.
Yeah, so before we end, I would like to mention that African Youth Network is launching a project to plant trees. So if you're located near Ferdinand, I'm not sure what city he's in, but if you're in Nigeria, check with African Youth Network to see if you could get involved in their tree planting and wildflower and native plant planting project where you can take actions to grow biodiversity and fight climate change with your own hands. So that is very exciting. And Ferdinand, do you have any suggestions with how people can reach out to you with the tree and wildflower planting project in December?
Yes, they can reach out to me on my email. Then go to LinkedIn and search Africa Youth Network that has the blue logo. And then reach out also on YouTube. But this is my email address, so we could take it up from there. I just shared my email address. All right, so these are separate. No, they are not separate. They are the same. Benefit
Yes,
of
all
those
of
who
him
are
is
just joining,
yeah.
they're all the same. Yeah, they're all the same. So that's my email. You can equally reach out to me on LinkedIn, Emmanuel Ferdinand, so that we know how best we can plan for the project. Thank you so much. And I also want to say that I am in collaboration with Monarchs Matter, going to be in collaboration with the Monarchs Matter in planting flowers and other plants in Nigeria and other countries, just like I mentioned before, about 5 African countries. So it's going to be a huge project for us to take actions for the climate change, because we only have one planet. We should engage ourselves how best we can. Thank you so much.
Yeah, can you mention which 5 African countries it is so people, perhaps if they're located near the program, then they could participate?
All right, I have Nigeria, I have Kenya, I have South Africa, I have Uganda, and I have Ghana. All right, let me type them. Nigeria, Ghana, Uganda, Kenya, and then South Africa. So you can reach out to me if you're from any of these countries I just mentioned. And mind you, what we are doing can be replicated in other countries as well. If you want us to do some things of that nature in your country, you can also reach out to me so that we can know how best we plan. The 5 African countries I mentioned are not all the countries in the world, because climate change is a global issue at the moment. So everybody should join hands together to take actions on the possible things or the best things we can do in your country for us to combat climate change. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. If you also want to help monarch butterflies or any other butterfly species in your area. Like in Nigeria, we're doing the plain tiger butterfly or the African monarch. So if you want to know how you can protect butterfly species that are native in your area, feel free to reach out to me as well. I'm also not only am I working with African Youth Network, I'm also working with other environmentalists in Pakistan to plant wild carrot for common yellow swallowtail butterflies. So feel free to reach out to us, me and Ferdinand, if you need anything. Need any guidance or funding, we could provide that. And that is all from me. Thank you guys so much for joining. I really appreciate that you guys all showed up. I think we had over 20 people join today. Some people joined and left. I understand that there's a blackout in Nigeria currently. So thank you guys for joining and persevering through that. Okay, thank you everyone. I'm going to end the meeting now.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, yeah, it's wonderful to have you amongst us here. Thank you very much. We hope to hear from you soon. So probably we could host another session with Monarchs Matter. So where we look into another theme, or perhaps discuss another aspect of biodiversity and climate change. So overall, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone's kind words in the chat. Have a great morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. Bye, everyone.